I farm so hard, the employees wanna find me, and then wanna hire me. What's 100K to a guy like me? Could you please remind me? Farm so hard, this ain't easy. Working late nights, you best believe me. My grades can only go A's. Never wanna see another B unless I'm Jay-Z. Farm so hard.
What's good, fam? It's your host, Jim Pruitt, aka Farm G and ED, and I'm bringing an episode of the Farm So Hard podcast. Today, I have a special episode. It's gonna be really cool getting to talk to some of the people that I've really been wanting to chat with for a few years. You have to be living under a rock to not hear about the C3 group. This is going to be a group of critical care pharmacists that can be based out of Georgia, and they've been doing phenomenal work over the years. But I don't want to talk too much because we're going to be discussing their book from the beginning, the planning, and really dive into all the aspects of their book. So I'm going to be quiet. Guys, please go ahead and introduce yourself one by one, please.
Great. Yeah. Thanks for having us on, Jim. So my name's Anthony Hawkins. I'm a faculty member, clinical associate professor with the University of Georgia. Again, one of the members of the University of Georgia Critical Care Collaborative, also known as C3. Been faculty for 10 years on one of the extended campuses about 200 miles in the southwest corner of Georgia, where I practice in a medical ICU and I precept pharmacy students, pharmacy residents, and I also have an adjunct faculty appointment with the medical school, the Medical College of Georgia, and precept medical students.
All right. My name is Andrea Sikora. I am also a clinical associate professor at the University of Georgia College of Pharmacy, a member of C3, and I am based out of the Augusta extended campus. So I have a practice site at Wellstar MCG as a ICU float pharmacist. And I have been on faculty since 2017, so the years are ticking by quite quickly. And I have a research program that looks at how to use artificial intelligence to improve ICU medication decision making.
Thanks so much for having us. I'm Susan Smith. I completed my pharmacy training at University of Tennessee in Memphis, did 2 years of residency at Vanderbilt in Nashville, and then started here on faculty at UGA, also in 2017. And I'm on our Athens campus, and I practice in a mixed medical surgical ICU at Piedmont Athens Regional. And I'm really excited to be here today and to share some information about InteGREAT.
Thanks everyone for coming on. This has been a really cool thing to get all of you guys together and to see the transition that you guys have had from mostly clinical to this leadership work. And I think that most of our audience who've followed you guys over the years really appreciate the fact that you was able to put together this book. But I want to transition to the origins of this. If you guys been working on this for a while, but can you tell us the initial inspiration to the creation of this book?
I would love to take that story on. So the big inspiration for us was we felt we had a really special story to tell, and we were excited to share it. I remember we were together at a retreat, actually, and we were just kind of reflecting on all of the things that we had done and celebrating people's individual successes of, successful promotions and different awards and seeing people reach their goals. And it really, what struck me in that moment was look at all of the great things that I've watched all of, these, my colleagues, but also my friends achieve, but also how much fun and how much joy it had brought. So for me, I just kept thinking, I think this is a story worth telling. And, that was really for me what I was the most excited about, and thinking that this might be a model that could help others in their career as well. Again, not just from a success of, you get to add this item or this item to your CV, but truly to have, collegiality and fellowship within a career. And I think that's a really beautiful thing.
That's great. As you guys get started with the book and you guys had your early inspiration, I'm pretty sure you've had many challenges with putting this book together. Can you walk the audience through that? Because I believe most people are the most concerned, or this is the biggest thing that's limiting them. So if they can hear it from you guys first, it may not be a challenge for them as they get started in their process.
Yes, I'm happy to talk about that. So one of the biggest things with taking on a big project is it's a little bit of fear of commitment, right? You look at something, you say, that's a big lift, and I wonder if everyone else is going to take it as seriously. And if you put in time, is someone else going to do their side? And then, every decision you make in your career and in your life of how you spend time, there's an opportunity cost. If you're writing this book, then you're not doing something else. And so I think the early stages to me, when I think about the challenges is, are we all really serious about doing this in terms of putting in that type of commitment? And then thinking about, okay, what makes us excited about it? There were different ideas that we came up with at various points of, what makes the most sense. So I think to me, that was probably one of the bigger challenges, up front. And then it's, of course, making a game plan. What's a reasonable timeline and all that kind of logistical stuff, I think is very important. And so, I had they say that the hardest workout is getting to the gym. But it's that initial commitment to just drive to the gym. I felt like once we were going, things went really fast, actually.
And I'll add on that I think, as Andrea mentioned, this idea first came up at one of our annual retreats that we have as a group. And Andrea brought up the idea. And I think at first the rest of us kind of looked at each other across the table and we're like, are we really going to write a book? Like, that seems like a really big undertaking. That's not something any of us have really considered. So I think at first we had a little chuckle, like, yeah, that'd be great to write a book. Like, yeah, maybe someday. And after that first time that it came up in discussion, we really kind of sat on the idea for a little while. I think we all marinated on it a little bit. And really some of that passion for realizing that we do have something special that we think other people can use and we want to share it with them. I think that passion is what really inspired us to truly get started with it. And so it was probably about a year later when we really got serious about taking the next steps and making that commitment to writing it.
Yeah, and I know for me, just the concept of writing a book was just not even in my wheelhouse of thoughts really ever in my career. I also think the fear, not only Andrea mentioned, like the fear of commitment. A lot of times when we talk amongst ourselves and if we're going to work on a project together, we really have a really nice clean outline of when things are going to happen. And so you have a better idea of what your calendar looks like and carving that amount of time out. But something that's more of a 1.5 to 2 year long process, I think that type of commitment and not really sure where the workload is going to be heaviest at. And then also I think just, our history in our skill set is probably more related to medical writing and more quantitative type writing, not as much abstract and creative type writing. So I know there was some sense of fear, at least within myself and maybe at least one or two of the others, that really was a barrier you had to overcome mentally to really commit and get excited and motivated to do it.
I'm so excited you guys listed all of those challenges for everyone so they can really get to understand what you guys went through and how they can take that part and be able to strategize for it. And it goes without saying, you guys are the leaders within pharmacy. I think when you look at education, leadership, and critical care in itself, everyone knows your guys' name. And I think when it comes to listening to you guys talk about all of this, and I think about the hundreds of students and residents that you've mentored over years and how you're able to show that you guys can struggle with some things too. But I think how you guys overcame those will be a significant thing as well. But I want to really drive home this point of the vision and the primary goal of the book and really lay this out for everyone. And I know you guys mentioned a little bit before, but can you just bring us back to either finish up any challenges you guys mentioned before, but really kind of transition into the vision and the goals of the book and walk us through how you guys really broke up the components of this book?
I would also say kind of in the challenges and initial phases, I do love to read and I like to think about these things and I do enjoy the writing process. And I had thought about writing another book, which was about mentorship. And I think spending a little bit of time thinking about that was able to reduce some of the activation energy for this. But it's interesting to think about, what do you want from a book? Is this just content, like someone reads cover to cover and now they know new content? Are you looking for this to be, really in depth and super detailed? Or are you wanting to have, brief, introductions and overviews? And, there's a ton of stuff about teamwork. There's whole sections, in a Barnes and Noble type store or something like that. But, the part where you make it actionable and truly start thinking about what works for your particular team and then what works within a healthcare environment, or even academia, those parts were lacking. And so I think when we started thinking about the vision and primary goals, the goal was to provide, concrete guide to creating a team that's got enough content and enough resources that if you want to go read more on a particular thing like Crucial Conversations, you can go look into that book or something else. But then that the end product is that the reader or the group that is doing the workbook together walks away with a more defined team. I don't know, Anthony or Susan, do you have other comments on that?
Yeah, I think in general, just, when we talk about our group, our big mission statement for ourselves is really to pay it forward. And that is to give to the next generation. And we do that a lot. And we talk about it in the book, how we integrate our learners and even our friends and other colleagues, mentees, mentors, et cetera, into the work that we do. And those have always happened, but in just smaller bits over time. And I think when we're thinking about this book and the purpose of this book, it's just a platform to pay it forward on a much larger scale. The people that have invested in us, investing in each other, the support systems that we have from our employers to our families and friends. How can we take all of that and really put it into one concise, uniform place that other folks can really benefit from all the things that we have been able to benefit from thus far in our career?
Yeah, and I'll add to that just a little bit too, that I think, we know so many and we see so many full-time clinicians that have an interest and a passion in doing other things in addition to kind of the bedside clinical service. Interest in, scholarship, research, professional development, everything else, but it's really hard to find the time for that. Same thing in academia. We see a lot of faculty members who are really pulled into their teaching and their service, but it's really hard to find time to do the scholarship. And so even though there's that interest, it's just hard to make it happen. And we found that with our group and the kind of team structure that we developed, we were really able to be effective and more productive together than we are apart in terms of some of those other areas. And we just see this as such an untapped opportunity for many in both the clinical space and the academic space, and are just really excited to be able to kind of share some of what we've learned and what we've implemented with others.
Likewise, I'm super excited about that part too. But I want to give the audience a chance to understand some of the other components. Like, what was the major milestones that you guys had to go through when writing this book? Because again, you guys mentioned it took a while, but what were those milestones?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first major milestone was probably about a year after the idea was proposed, and that was the decision to actually do this. So making that decision was certainly a huge milestone for us. We then went through, some of the logistics of kind of what are our chapters going to be, who's going to write what, and kind of divided things up. I think our next big milestone was that we had a writing retreat. So we got an Airbnb in the Georgia mountains. We went up there for a couple of days, and we brought our computers and we just sat down and wrote, for about 2 days. And I think that was when it really started to feel real for me, at least, that we had something that was starting to look like more of a final-ish product, and really had a lot of that content written down. We were there together doing it, and that was a really exciting moment for me. I think after that, then there was some of the grunt work of, okay, we have this solid draft started, but we've got to pull all the pieces together. So I think the next milestone was really coming up with some deadlines of, all right, we're going to have this written. We're going to, have our plan for reviewing and editing the other chapters that others wrote. And then from there, figuring out, okay, now how do we go about publishing this, and looking into options and people to help us with editing, creating figures, and the publishing process. So to me, it was kind of those 3 stages of deciding, all right, we're going to do it, coming together for that writing retreat, and then kind of putting together the final touches from then, which was a little bit challenging at that stage, kind of pulling all the pieces together.
Yeah, and I think when we were at the Airbnb and we sat down and just did some real writing and fleshed a lot of the chapters out, we really didn't have a good idea of which sequence the chapters were going to go in necessarily. We knew all of the chapters. We really had an idea for writing. There may have been one or two extras that popped in or out of there that we decided they were too similar and combine them, or there were too much content, so we break them out. I think one other key milestone in my mind was when we like finalized or even got the first draft of what the cover of the book was going to look like. And I think to me, like, that really solidified in my mind, this is going to be a book. It's one thing to get a review back from a journal that's got a bunch of red script on it from the review process and that type of thing. But getting the cover of the book created was really a pivotal moment for me.
I felt the magic too, when I saw the gears. That was, I got little butterflies in my stomach for that one.
It's definitely interesting aspects, bringing all the different pieces together. It seems like there are like 3 to 4 major steps involved. From my experience, the hardest part for most people is just getting started. And you guys listed the same thing, especially when it comes to writing. I know many of our listeners, particularly the writers, again, struggle with this initiation step. And as we've seen before, having multiple authors can also be a challenge, but might resonate to many of our audience. Now, I know you guys mentioned it earlier, but how did you guys approach dividing the work of the book? With so many authors involved and with you guys being accomplished individually and as a group, how did you decide who would handle which part and what was the process of organizing the writing?
Great question. So we mentioned that Andrea kind of first developed the idea for the book, but she made it very clear the whole time that this is not her book. This is our book. And it very much has been a collective project where each of us have contributed equally. So when we kind of sat down together and came up with a list of chapters and topics that we wanted to be sure to include, and then literally had a sign-up sheet. So we said, here's a list of all of our topics. Who feels most passionate about writing each one? And at this point, working together, we kind of know who's going to be the best at writing each one. So I think we might have even kind of penciled in some ideas and then said, everyone go see if this is what you want. Sign up for the ones you feel the most passionate about writing. But we each kind of divided the chapters equally in terms of writing the initial draft. And then we went through several iterations of review so that everyone in the end had thoroughly reviewed each of the chapters that were created.
One thing I wanted to add on the process part that I think is really important is that there's that initial talk, where you're like, oh, we should do this research project. I think we should really look at this. And you're like, yeah, we should do it. But there's then that next level of like, okay, what is the purpose of the project? Can you write it in one sentence? What is the hypothesis of this study? Can you write it in one sentence? Who's doing the IRB? And so that's an example in a research project. But here I felt like one of the key steps was it was hard. And sometimes you're just talking about it. What does the vision look like? And I remember sitting down one morning to write the first section or the first little part was like, what is a team, I think. And I remember when I put that down and then kind of had an idea and put it out for everyone to like edit and look at it, and it morphs into something better than it was. That to me was a really kind of important moment of, okay, we're all truly on the same page now of not just talking something, but kind of moving forward in that way.
You really touched on my next question about pivotal moments. It seems like getting everyone on the same page was a significant step for you. Were there any other pivotal moments during your process? I'm sure you can count up a ton of these, but I really want to give our audience a clear understanding of what those turning points were and how they may relate during their own experiences.
I think when we were first putting this idea together, we already kind of discussed a little bit about the fear of the commitment, the fear of the skill set that was required that maybe, we weren't as adept to with the qualitative, more abstract, creative writing. And I think for me, at least, I would have procrastinated a lot. Procrastination is very emotionally driven response. And I think having that dedicated place where we all went and sat together, even though we weren't talking to each other, we were all sitting in the living room floor of a house that we were renting for the weekend or on the porch. We weren't talking to each other, but just being in that space where you feel a little bit more emotionally secure. And you have the accountability sitting around the room watching to see whose keyboard is ticking or who's not working kind of thing. And so I think really kind of overcoming some of that emotional response, to the work and the fear and the commitment I think that was really fundamental for getting the progress and the momentum of the book moving.
And I want to emphasize that one of to me, the key things about working in a team is that you're motivating yourself to do work you want to do, in part because you enjoy being with the other people. And so it is nice to spend time all in the same space and kind of talk about, are we going to make a charcuterie board later? Are we making chili? In between, we're doing work. But there isn't a motivating factor to that. And that's not a bad thing. Now, I read once that you need to treat yourself as your own best employee. How do you get your best employee to do things? You incentivize them, right? You give them nice things to do, or nice things. And so if you're thinking about it, like, to me, sitting there was a huge perk. But at the end, we have this product, which is kind of neat.
I think another pivotal moment to me was really at the very end. We had gone through numerous phases of review and revision, as you can imagine, and we really had one more kind of final review we needed to do. And it was right around kind of the holiday time. We had been delaying a little bit. And then we sat down and we determined a release date for our book. We realized we were getting together for our annual retreat, and that would be such a great time to actually make the release. And so creating that date and having, all right, this is our goal. On this date, we are releasing this book. That was so motivating to kind of get these last final steps done, and have that excitement of knowing when it was actually going to be real and released to the public.
And again, you notice it's based around, we're all like, oh, that means that night at dinner, we're going to be able to celebrate this. Very motivating, very enjoyable,
This is super fascinating because as I listen, it's clear the process of writing your book truly embodies the content within it. The way you brought everyone together, collaborated effectively as a team, and divided the work to leverage each person's strengths really reflects the principles you're writing about. It's almost like you're living out the book's message as you create it, which is insane within itself. But before we dive into the specifics of the book's content, could you walk us through the general structure and the main chapters of the book?
Yeah, sure. So the book has really three main sections, and it's broken down. There's, I don't know, eight to 10 chapters per section. The first section is really the principles of a team. The second section is building a great team. And the third is kind of growing and optimizing your team for more sustainability. So the first section, principles of a team, this is a little bit more focused really on investing in the development of the team. Sometimes your teams are assigned maybe by your employer. It doesn't seem overly organic. It's kind of forced. And we do recognize that. And so I think several of the chapters in the first section on the principles of a team is whether it's organic, whether it's prescribed, you still need to invest in the development up front to build a strong foundation. We really describe the differences between a team and a group and how that really influences the perception or the context of the work that you're doing and the time that you're spending together. And then we talk a little bit about developing the inner workings of the team. So this is where you are really kindling the fire, right? I think of kindling a fire, you're taking and you're shredding a big piece of wood into really small, tiny, fine details. And you put a lot of effort into really good kindling so that when it ignites, it really goes off. And then you have something that's nice, that's large and effective. And then it doesn't take as much effort on the back end to keep that fire burning. The second section, the building a team, building a great team. This is where we really focus on developing the relationships between the group members, whether it's as a team collectively or even just having some dedicated like one-on-one time to learn each team member a little bit more individually. We talk about retreats, scheduled downtime. We've kind of referenced this earlier, like the importance of knowing who's in your team, who knows what, and who is kind of responsible, like who's the expert in your group for this type of skill or this type of knowledge base, this kind of content area, and that type of thing. We referenced the book range a few times in the book, and I think this is the section where we really talk about leveraging your range. Knowing all of the background, the skills that people have, even unrelated to pharmacy, and how that influences your skill set and just kind of the strengths that you bring to the group. And kind of, again, going along those lines, like leveraging the strengths and the weaknesses of each of the team members so that you know when someone else needs to pick up and help out where that deficit may be. And then really the last key point in the second group, or in the second section of building the team is really finding that single thread of alignment. What is that kind of core common mission that you have that really aligns everyone together in all of their goals, whether that's professionally, personally, and that type of thing. Then the last section is growing or optimizing the team. And this is where we really talk about chucking wood on the fire, the big pieces to just keep the fire hot. We talk a little bit about whether, the importance of growing deep roots, like really focusing on investing more and more time with your core group of people. And when is it appropriate? And when do you start discussing branching out? Do you kind of collaborate with other people that are outside of your team, or do you invite them to be a part of your team? And so we talk a decent amount about growing your team versus, just collaborating kind of externally. And then a few other key chapters that stand out to me in this section are conflict within your team. Really kind of like fleshing out when you have conflict within your team. Is it a task related conflict or is it more relationship driven, and kind of how to navigate, kind of addressing, conflicts. Alignment and realignment. I talk in the second section, we talk about finding that initial alignment, but as you develop your team and you have a sustained success over the next several years, your priorities may change. And I think it's a good conversation to have about assessing your alignment and maybe needing some realignment. A good example of that, right now I'm starting to shift a little bit from the clinical research areas of like fluid stewardship and really trying to shift and navigate more into the scholarship of teaching and learning. And just at our very last retreat, one of the topics of conversation that was posed to me was, Anthony, we see that you're kind of making this pretty significant shift in your scholarship, and your areas of focus. So how do you see C3 as a group? How do you see this group like contributing positively to this transition, like into this new space? So obviously I am like kind of recentering myself. And so just having those types of discussions with how does that group help with that realignment? And then we've already referenced this a couple times, is breaking bread, like eating, sharing a meal together, really just spending time together, as a family at a table. In the kitchen cooking, I think is one of my fondest memories. So I think those are the three big sections, the three kind of some big overarching views within those sections. So I'll stop there and see if we have any contributions or any further direction or detail.
I think something else to point out about the general framework for the book is that the chapters are designed to be very concise. Most of the chapters are around 2 to 4 pages in length, and they're each followed by some questions to think about, to reflect on, to kind of help in building different aspects of your team. So it's really designed so that this should be kind of a quick read and reference for you. If you have, 10, 15 minutes of downtime, you could read a chapter and think about some of these reflection questions. So it's designed in a way that someone could kind of look at it in very short kind of chunks of content at a time.
It's a great overview of the book structure and the main sections. Now, I would like to talk about the potential impact. How do you guys envision clinicians or other professionals benefiting from the insights and strategies that's discussed in your book? Do you have any stories or feedback from readers who implemented these ideas successfully?
Yeah, so this is something that I think about a lot. One of the beauties of clinical training, which is a lot of what the PharmD curriculum is, and if you were to choose to go into residency, is you're learning how to be, a clinician, essentially. How do you interact with patients and review, provide comprehensive medication management and, other like healthcare type tasks. But the curriculum is far less focused on what are, we often call soft skills, but they're not soft skills. They're absolutely essential skills. It's teamwork, it's leadership, it's collaboration, it's logistics, it's project management, it's, conflict management, all of those things. And at least for me in my career, I have felt like when I got out of residency, one of the biggest things that I focused on a personal level was all of that even I just finished recently 2 books about how to run an effective meeting, and the difference between a good one-on-one meeting versus other types of meetings. Incredibly eye-opening stuff, that, I'm just not getting necessarily when I was, in pharmacy school. So I do think that some elements of this book are introducing people who are at the bedside to some, basically other skills that are really, really helpful. And I think sometimes we create a false dichotomy of like, oh, if I am a clinician, then I would never be doing, this leadership-y stuff, But the reality is you're a practice-based leader. If you are a preceptor, you are leading, your trainees. If you are doing a project of any kind, there is all of those elements that are in that. So even if you identify primarily as, someone who works at the bedside, I still think that those kind of collaborative skill sets are incredibly important. And so I think one of the parts that I find really valuable about this book is it's a nice introduction to a lot of those topics. And if something sparks you to be like, oh, I think that really helps me in this particular case, then maybe you go do, further reading or whatever in that area.
Yeah, and I think something that really jumps out to me when you think about clinical teams, even as the clinical practice pharmacist, like Andrea mentioned, you're going to be at the bedside. You're probably going to be precepting in some capacity. You probably do have some administrative responsibilities like policy and protocol development, revision. You're probably involved in committee work within your own hospital institution, but maybe even state or national or international professional organizations. And you may be incentivized to do research and scholarship, whether it's through student and resident interest that you oversee and mentor. Sometimes we talk to folks that are clinical bedside pharmacists that are really interested in doing research, but it's not supported or they don't have time to do it within their job description in the confines of their 8 to 10 hour shift. And so I think a lot of what we talk about can apply to all of those different sectors and how those really can be optimized by leveraging them and working together with all of your other ICU pharmacists at your hospital to help make space for each other to really do what you really wish to be doing that makes you feel empowered.
And even again, thinking about a team, like I actually just got off of a call earlier today and he was like, well, I'm really interested in doing research, but I'm at a smaller institution. We have fewer resources, but is there something that we can align? Well, for me right now with my research program, I'm highly incentivized by having interested, institutions to try things out and to validate different stuff that I'm working on. So I am personally very excited to throw resources and expertise, if you will, in that direction, which is very mutually beneficial for the both of us. But if you're not thinking in that frame of we could make a team and have different people that work together and find that alignment, it's hard to have that type of success. So I think some of the book too is just having the mindset of who is my team and going and making that happen.
Absolutely. When it comes to clinical teams, the more I hear you guys discuss this, the more I reflect on certain parts of the book. It really emphasizes the importance of being intentional in how we work with others, to be honest. The intentionality is really crucial, whether it's quality time with a teammate or collaborating with a colleague. And as I keep revisiting different sections of the book, I'm like reading it in my mind as I'm talking to you guys, I'm training myself to really work more efficiently with people. And this is particularly relevant at the bedside for me, whether it's going to be in a code or a more acute situation. So this is really profound information that we're talking about here. However, the principles also apply outside of the clinical setting, and most of us have outside responsibilities, to be honest. And whether it's conducting research or engaging in committee work or mentoring, all these insights you guys are mentioning really align perfectly. But that brings me to my next question. You've mentioned some content in a book that readers have implemented successfully. Do you have any stories or feedback from readers who've applied these ideas and seen positive outcomes? It would be great to hear the experiences from different people.
One story I particularly enjoyed was that we have used retreats, regularly, at least once a year. And then also the combination of what we call writing jams and kind of other touch points. And I actually feel like I took our model and was like, I have a research team. And so I had a research team retreat where I got all these people that were usually meeting via Zoom. It's usually only for an hour, or via like email threads. And it was really enjoyable to spend time all in one space. Again, we got meals, and kind of had that other time to chat as well. But it very much reaffirmed the bonds, if you will, and the collaborations. And I thought this is really great. And I was talking to somebody else about maybe a new research collaboration, and I mentioned having this retreat and stuff like that. And they're like, oh my gosh, what a great idea. I don't know why we're not doing that. So I do think that sometimes, again, it's that mindset that you're kind of inspiring to other folks. And so at least for me, it was really very validating to hear someone else agree that they thought there was some value in that type of togetherness. And I know sometimes, at least, a retreat can be a dirty word sometimes in faculty. It takes up a bunch of time, nothing gets done and whatever. But I think a well done retreat is very, very special.
This maybe goes back to your previous question a little bit. But I think one thing I want to emphasize from the book that I think could be helpful for clinicians is how to go about finding a team if you don't already have one. And I think even prior to the book, we commonly heard from other people that said, oh, what your C3 group is doing is so cool, but we can't do that because I don't have people at my institution that have the same interest, or I just don't have a group like that. And what a lot of people don't realize is that while we all get a paycheck from UGA, we aren't in the same location. The 5 of us are spread across 4 different cities in the state of Georgia. Anthony and I are 4 hours apart from each other. So we don't see each other in person on a day-to-day basis. And it very much is possible to have really great and effective teams that you don't actually see face to face. So whether it's identifying collaborators for research that are at other institutions, or finding people even at your own institution that you might not see on a daily basis, maybe thinking interprofessionally or things like that. I think there's some creative ways to identify teams that can be really effective. And we've definitely seen kind of the light bulb go on when we talk about that with others.
Yeah. And I think, Jim, just even when we first started this, you mentioned that, the way that we do our retreats and the way that we even, the focus or the plan that we had, the strategy we used for writing this book was practicing what we preach. We wrote the book in the same way that the book talks about working together. And so, hearing you say that, and hearing even prior students or residents or folks that have worked with us that have gotten the book, we've heard that a few different times now, is that, man, reading this book really emphasizes what they do in the classroom or in their practice setting, or, just truly validating that we are living out the type of thing that we're telling others about and how to do.
You guys are definitely doing that. And it really goes back to why you all start working together in the first place, paying it forward. That seems to be the overall message, and I'm hoping that our audience is able to get that as well. I think this book is a perfect expression of that, the vibe and the structure you guys have. And the more I listen to you all talk and understand how this book was created, the more it all really comes together to me of what the expression of the book is. You guys are truly living that. And I really hope that our audience is able to see how these pieces are able to fit together perfectly with who they are as individuals and what they're teaching. Now, let's transition beyond the book. You all have done a ton of work over the years, whether in the classroom, clinically. Your work is, beyond just what a usual critical care pharmacist would do. What are the next projects? What are the next things you guys are doing? And what are some things you want the audience to really know about?
So it's interesting when we get together each year for our retreat. One of the things that we do, and we suggest doing this in the book, is to sit down and think about our short and our long-term goals and how we're going to achieve those. And one of our more recent goals is to kind of step back a little bit from the high quantity of smaller projects and to really think about how we can make the most impact, and thinking a little bit bigger. And writing the book was our first kind of prime example of doing that. And I think one of the things that we're most excited about over the upcoming year is just identifying opportunities to share the book with others. We really are excited about helping other people achieve their maximum potential and satisfaction in what they do at work. And we're excited to go out there and share the book and help guide people through implementing some of these strategies.
There's a less foot better, or Greg McCown's essentialism. And, one of the really important things to realize is that when you're doing any type of project, there's a creative component to it. You are creating something new. And in order to be creative, you have to give yourself emotional space in order to do that. So you're not just going to put in 30 minutes on the calendar and be like, okay, this is, I'm going to make my, 5-year plan. You need to have, create very thoughtfully some blocks of time to kind of do that type of deep work and really focus. And so I think that is something that the book very much is a result of that thought process, but is also something that we kind of talk about. And so again, even when you're thinking about making your teams, you don't want to have a bunch of little things. What's the big few things that you're the most excited with?
Perfect. Now, considering how the book fits into your professional activities, can you share more about how it's influencing your roles and transitioning you to new opportunities? Anthony mentioned earlier that you guys' activities are changing a little bit, and the book is part of this transition. Is there anything else you can think of this book complements in your professional lives? And how is it really pushing you forward and impacting the work that you're doing?
We alluded to this a little bit already, but I feel like nearly everything that I do professionally, I'm using elements from this book. As I move forward into, whatever, my next projects or ideas will be, I feel like I'm always taking this book with me. As a group, we are, intentionally stepping back from some of the smaller projects, but we constantly have new ideas, research projects, papers coming up, and we're definitely using every element of the book as we do that. We're working on, writing a kind of little review paper right now where we certainly are using the principles that we talk about in the book to kind of guide how we're working through that. And I feel like there are always, almost every day, we're interacting about some kinds of new ideas that we want to explore together.
This is perfect. And I don't want to go deeper into the book because I think people really need to go read it for themselves to really appreciate hearing this, and then listen to the book is going to be phenomenal. But just so everyone can have exactly where it's at, can you guys tell us exactly how we can get access to the book and any of the other things that you guys are providing to the public?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. So the book, InteGREAT, InteGREAT, is available on Amazon. You can also go directly to our group's website, which is critcarecollab.com. And you can find a link to the book there, as well as some other insightful resources and other things just about our group.
This has been amazing, and it's been really nice to be able to have a conversation with you guys about the technical parts of the book, the planning. But before we close out, is there any closing words that you guys want to have to the audience before we leave?
Just thank you for having us on this podcast. This was a ton of fun to talk about it. And there's very few times that hanging out with this crew for an hour isn't a great use of my time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. If anyone's interested, we also do have some opportunities to have some coaching for your team as you're working on creating or growing a team. Also doing workshops for a group of people or a department. So more than happy to discuss any of those ideas if that's something that you may be interested as well. Or really just discussing anything about teamwork and collaboration is always exciting for us. So thank you again so much for having us.
Thank you guys again. And this has been a great episode. And I hope that the audience really got to get a piece of what this book's about. And more importantly, what the work that the C4 group is doing. So I want to close it out and don't want to take too much more of your guys' time, but we close the episode out the same way every single time, guys. You don't have to be a pharmacist. You don't have to work in an ED, but everything you do, make sure you farm so hard.
Closes it. Ozzy scratches his head. Whatever she's looking for, it isn't in there.